You remember the dream, though no one ever told it to you. A room with no windows, but sunlight on the floor. A line of people waiting to kneel before a figure whose face you cannot see, only the glint of medals, the weight of silence, the smell of iron and prayer. Each one smiles as they kneel. Each one whispers the same word. You never hear it. You only feel it, like a rope tightening around your lungs. There is a moment just before you wake where the air grows thick and sacred. The walls breathe, the floor vanishes, and you remember something ancient. Obedience feels safe, even when it kills. You walk through churches that once swallowed screams. You touch marble steps worn smooth by the faithful knees of the damned. You wonder why statues never blink even when blood ran beneath them. And somewhere, behind your ribs, a voice says they told you evil would be ugly, but it arrived clean-shaven, patient, disciplined, and it asked for your trust, not your rebellion, not your hatred, just your quiet cooperation. You were taught that evil arrives snarling, that it wears fangs, spills blood in the open, and declares itself with force. But you've seen something far colder, the smile of the one who obeys, the one who holds the door open for tyranny, not with malice, but with immaculate politeness. The one who signs the order, stamps the document, bows before the flag, and sleeps soundly. This evil does not scream, it whispers protocol. It does not explode, it kneels. You have mistaken goodness for compliance so many times that you no longer see the difference. You praise the quiet student, the loyal citizen, the faithful worker. But in the silence of that praise, a deeper voice has grown, one that knows how to sit still while horror passes by. You were not born to be a coward, but you were raised to mistake cowardice for peace. They taught you to submit and called it virtue, to remain uninvolved and called it wisdom. And so you stand at the edge of atrocity and speak only in passive verbs. What they never told you is that evil survives not through cruelty, but through delegation. It survives in the one who says, "I was just following orders." The phrase echoes through centuries like a hymn composed by the dead. The clerk who filed the names, the priest who blessed the train, the teacher who erased the question. They all smiled. They all stood still. They all called it duty. You have knelt too often, not before gods, but before systems, before uniforms, before traditions whose origins have rotted into superstition. You kneel to be safe, to be accepted, to be untouched. But the kneeling has shaped your spine. You are becoming a creature that cannot stand, only bow. And the longer you bow, the more holy the dirt beneath you begins to feel. They handed you morality like a hymn sheet. Sing these words, in this order, at this pitch. Do not ask who wrote them. Do not ask who benefits from them. Do not change the melody. And above all, do not stop singing. Even when the building burns, even when the doors are locked, even when the smoke begins to sting your eyes and your lungs beg for disobedience. Just keep singing, and you did. You sang over the cries. You smiled as you filled out the form. You applauded as the guilty were marched past you, chained and calm. You whispered, "This is not my place to intervene." You said, "It's complicated." You said, "It's not my fault." And you believed it, because belief is easy when it means you get to keep your life, your home, your job, your skin. But underneath that belief is a secret you never dared to speak. You were afraid, not of violence, but of standing alone. You were afraid of being the one who stops clapping first, of being noticed, of being questioned. You would rather be good by consensus than true in solitude. You would rather be wrong together than right alone. This is the theology of comfort, the gospel of the obedient dead. You think you are not part of the machine because you do not turn the gears. but you keep them oiled, you praise their efficiency, you defend their necessity, you justify their existence with holy words like order, discipline, structure. You hide behind institutions and call it ethics. You pass judgment without risk. You live in the middle ground where all crimes go to be laundered. You mistake restraint for integrity, but restraint is only virtuous when there is something within you worth restraining. You do not choose silence, you have nothing else to say. You do not choose submission, you simply never imagined another path. You carry the body of a man, but the soul of a ledger, columns of permission, rows of excuses, a bloodless life. You want to be remembered as good, but you do not want to be good at the cost of your comfort. So you settle for cleanliness. You settle for applause. You settle for a gravestone that says he never caused trouble. But do you know what that stone will not say? It will not say who died because you didn't speak. It will not say what evil you blessed with your silence. It will not say what holy lie you fed until it grew teeth. There is a moment in every life where obedience becomes betrayal, not of others, but of yourself. You feel it the tightening in your chest when you agree with something you know is hollow. The stillness in your hands when they should be shaking. The nod you give that costs someone else everything. You tell yourself it's not your fault. But deep beneath your justifications, you know you have become the echo of a voice you do not respect. And still, you smile, because it is easier, because you fear that to frown is to be seen, because you have mistaken survival for integrity. But integrity does not survive. It bleeds, it starves, it is exiled, it is crucified. And yet, you were once a child who could not tolerate unfairness, who cried when others were hurt, who felt something holy rise in your throat when you heard the truth. What happened to him? He was trained out of you. He was told that safety is better than truth, that unity is better than conscience, that obedience is noble, even when it betrays the soul. You buried him under layers of compliance and called it maturity. You dressed him in a suit, you gave him a title, you fed him praise, and now he smiles when he should weep. He applauds when he should scream. He shakes hands with liars and calls it diplomacy. But there is still one thing he cannot do. He cannot forget. Not entirely. Not forever. There are nights when the silence grows teeth, when the smile fades and something ancient stirs in your marrow. It does not use words, it does not ask permission, it is not civilized, it is a scream. It is the scream of the obedient dead, the ones who knelt until their necks broke, the ones who followed until they forgot where they were going, the ones who did everything right and helped evil win. And you are next, unless you remember, unless you stop smiling, unless you dare to let your spine unfold. You remember the hymn, not the words they've blurred into smoke, but the sound remains, smooth, harmonized, so rehearsed it no longer meant anything. The choir rose as the doors were sealed, as the floor beneath the altar grew warm with what could not be spoken. You heard it, not once, not twice, but for years. Beautiful music shielding a monstrous silence, and you kept singing. You think morality is what you believe in private, but morality is tested in the moment your voice could matter and you choose to remain part of the choir. The one that drowns out the screams. That choir is always there. It sings in parliament halls and dinner tables, in courtrooms and pulpits. It sings not to praise but to cover, to distract, to prevent the dissonance that truth would bring. And you were one of them. You knew something was wrong, you always do. You felt the unease in the back of your throat, the dissonance between the smile and the stench. But instead of speaking, you sang louder. You modulated your voice to match the others, because to stand apart is unbearable, because to hear the truth alone is a kind of exile. So you blend, You adjust. You tell yourself, this isn't the time, this isn't the place, it's not my responsibility. You wait for a more convenient moment, a safer moment, but those moments never come. Because the longer the choir sings, the more unthinkable silence becomes. You don't need to kill to be guilty. You only need to harmonize. You only need to make the lie sound beautiful, to make the scream fade beneath your melody. That is the theology of the modern age, not evil by knife, but evil by chorus. And every institution you adore is filled with these choirs. They wear robes, they sign laws, they bless violence with clean language, collateral, necessary, security. These words are sung with perfect pitch, so perfect that even the victims forget they are bleeding. You've heard it in courtrooms where injustice was framed in legal symmetry. You've heard it in sermons where genocide was baptized in scripture. You've heard it in classrooms where history was rewritten in pastel chalk. The choir trains you to look away, not to run, not to shout, but to stay, to smile, to participate, because that is what makes you feel human belonging. But that belonging costs more than you realize. You are not neutral. There is no neutral. Your silence is not blank space. It is scaffolding. It is foundation. You are the cathedral inside which the crime echoes without interruption. Ask yourself, who are you when the hymns stop, when the words run dry, when the stage lights go black and the curtain drops? Are you still sure of yourself, or have you built your soul entirely out of borrowed lyrics? They told you to speak truth to power, but you misunderstood. You waited until the room was safe, until the applause was guaranteed, until your courage cost nothing. But truth is never spoken safely. Truth bleeds. It isolates. It ruins careers. It shatters families. That's how you know it's real. But instead, you joined the choir because you feared becoming a dissonant note. And in that fear, you forgot the simplest lesson. Every scream that has ever mattered began as a single, unbearable sound. One voice, out of tune, refusing to match, refusing to participate. That's what they murdered. That's what the machine silences first. Not the rebels with guns, but the voice that sings off-key. The one that refuses to celebrate the comfortable lie. The one that asks, what are we actually doing here? The one that stands in the middle of the ritual and says no more. But you've learned not to be that voice. You've learned to soften your edges, to round your thoughts, to replace conviction with civility. They told you not to offend, and you believed them, because offending meant risking your place in the song. You think you are good because you do not hate, but goodness is not the absence of hatred, it is the presence of risk. You do not risk anything. You sing what they teach. You believe what they hand you. You smile when instructed. You critique only within the lines. You call it nuance. You call it empathy. But it's cowardice, polished and tuned. You watched a man fall, and you analyzed the angle. You watched a child weep, and you quoted both sides. You saw a woman crushed, and you asked, but what was she doing there? These are not questions. These are harmonies. And the louder you sing, the more you forget that truth was never meant to be beautiful. Truth is a howl. It is a blade. It cuts you first. It leaves you alone. It disfigures your place in the world. And still, it is the only thing worth saying. But you're afraid, not of violence that's a fantasy you use to excuse your inaction. You're afraid of being cast out, of being seen as unpleasant, as difficult, as uncooperative, and so you coat your conscience in syrup and lace and melody. You know who else sang like that? The ones who watched the trains leave, the ones who heard the knocks at night, the ones who watched the churches empty and the neighbors vanish. They sang because music hides the stench, because harmony delays judgment, because evil, when dressed in robes and rhythm, is harder to confront. You tell yourself it's not the same, but the structure is identical. Obedience, denial, celebration. You think your age is more enlightened, but your enlightenment is anesthetic. It numbs you just enough to avoid screaming. It teaches you to whisper injustice with a smile, to nod at madness with eloquence, to bow while telling yourself you are free. But inside you, far below the layers of practiced speech, there is another voice. The one you buried, the one you mocked, the one that trembles, not from fear, but from recognition, because it knows. It always did. It remembers the scream. It remembers that truth is never voted on, that silence is never innocent, that choirs can kill more efficiently than knives. You want to believe you're better, that you wouldn't have done what they did, that you wouldn't have looked away, that you wouldn't have sung, but you are singing now, and the screams are still there. There's a door in your mind you've never opened, not because it's locked, but because you've convinced yourself it leads nowhere. You pass it daily, brushing your fingers against the rusted metal, pretending not to notice the dried blood near the hinge. You call it memory, you call it instinct, you call it caution, but it is neither. It is God, waiting behind the iron. Not the God they preach to you, not the domesticated one, not the God who fits in pamphlets or pre-approved creeds, not the smiling portrait with soft eyes and clean hands. That one is a forgery, crafted for public consumption, placed above courtrooms, stitched into flags, used as perfume to mask rot. The real God never needed your allegiance. The real God did not ask for hymns or buildings or well-dressed men who signed decrees. The real God was in the cell, in the smoke, in the silence between the questions. You didn't recognize him because he did not resemble safety. He resembled something far older: judgment without words, truth without reward, fire without warmth. And still, you prayed to the one outside the door, the soft one, the agreeable one, the one who nodded at injustice and offered spiritual language to soothe your complicity. That God made no demands, that God asked for nothing but admiration, and you gave it gladly. But that God never answered, because the one who answers lives behind the iron. You've always suspected it, in moments of unbearable clarity, when the ritual breaks, when the light shifts, when the silence grows too loud. You feel the weight of that door, not metaphorically, not philosophically, but viscerally, in the pit of your chest. Something presses outward, something wants to be known, but you retreat, because to open it is to be seen not as a believer, but as an accomplice. You have not followed God. You've followed permission. You've knelt before culture and called it covenant. You've worshipped your own reputation, and you've worn God's name as armor, thinking it would protect you from ever having to confront him. But he waits, not with love, not with comfort, but with memory. Not yours, his. He remembers every moment you stayed silent when truth was screaming. He remembers the names you didn't ask, the hands you didn't hold, the doors you didn't block, and he does not forgive them just because you felt bad later. This is not the God of recovery. This is the God of reckoning. And he speaks not with thunder, but with the unbearable stillness of a question: who did you save? Not who did you quote? Not who did you empathize with? Not who did you like, but who did you risk something for? Your theology has no answer. Your sermons dissolve. Your citations scatter like ash, because there is no doctrine to shield you from that question. There is no ritual that erases absence. You want to think you are moral because you meant well, but intention is a currency with no value in the face of death. No one was saved by your discomfort. No one survived because you felt conflicted. No injustice was stopped because you struggled internally. The door remains shut because you have not earned the right to open it. You want revelation without rupture. You want justice without judgment. You want to be a witness to history without being burned by it. And so you remain where it is safe among the clean-faced faithful, bowing before the fiction you've always mistaken for God. But fiction has no breath. It cannot hear you, and you know this. You've known it for years. That's why your prayers are hollow. That's why your conscience flickers at night. That's why you keep returning to the edge of that door and walking away. Because you suspect, and rightly, that the real God is not who you hoped he'd be. He does not hand out absolution like candy. He does not pat your head for being better than most. He is not impressed by your restraint. He is not swayed by your tears. He is waiting, and behind him, the truth that you have loved the idea of goodness more than its cost, that you have protected your image more than your soul, that you have feared being wrong more than you have feared being cruel. And so you have committed the most modern sin of all. You have outsourced your conscience to the state, to the pastor, to the majority. You've hidden behind systems, hoping they would carry the weight of your silence. But God is not deceived. He sees through structure, through language, through ceremony. He sees only the moment you knew and did nothing. You want forgiveness, but you have not confessed. You have only sanitized. You want peace, but you have not endured truth. You have only distracted yourself. And so the door waits, cold, heavy, closer than your own breath. You imagine opening it and being consumed. You imagine fire, wrath, judgment. You imagine being torn apart. And in this, at least, you are not wrong. Because to open that door is to lose your name, your position, your illusion of innocence. To open that door is to stand before the face of truth and realize you were never on its side. You were polite, you were thoughtful, you were moderate, but you were not just. You were not brave, you were not willing. And this is the great horror. That evil did not need you to be monstrous. It only needed you to be manageable, to be good enough in public, to be quiet enough in private, to do your job and not ask why. The door rusts quietly, and the God behind it does not fade. He waits, with the weight of every name you forgot, every scream you harmonized over, every excuse you blessed with sacred words, and the worst part, you still have the key. There is a hallway where the light never changes. You walk it often in your dreams. The walls are smooth, cold. The floor carries no reflection. Only your footsteps. Only your breath. At the end stands the door, iron, silent. The key is warm in your hand. It always has been. But tonight, something is different. You hear music, distant, familiar, a choir but hollow now. Unraveling, notes collapsing into noise. You turn back. The hallway is gone. You place the key into the lock, not to be forgiven, not to be welcomed, but to finally be seen. The door opens. No light spills out, only memory. And in it your voice, before the hymns, before the silence, before the smile. Still waiting, still burning, still asking, when will you stop hiding behind goodness and dare to be true?